I'm a big fan of schedules and lists, but you have to have the right attitude towards a schedule and a list. So first of all, you make a list of what things that you have to do that day, what important things you have to do that day. But you want to remember that that list should serve your higher interests, right? Your higher values. So that presupposes that you've already decided what your higher values are and that you have a vision in place. Then you want to decompose that into what's necessary that day. Aim high, let's say, and then concentrate on the day. What are the most important things that I need to attend to so that I'm in better shape tonight than I was in the morning? And if you ask yourself that question, you have to want the answer, which is rather demanding, let's say. It's another example of orienting yourself properly. So your aim is to get the answer to this question. And your perceptions and your thoughts will organize themselves around that question, and you'll get answers. Like they'll rise up, in that mysterious way that thoughts rise up. And some of them you'll find uncomfortable because your mind will present you with demands to do things that you may have been avoiding or that you find difficult or challenging. But you can train yourself to set yourself a list of tasks for the day that do put you in better shape that night than you were in the morning. It doesn't help to shy away from difficult issues because you're stuck with them. They're not going away. The best you can do is something worthwhile in the face of them. And so you figure out what that worthwhile thing is, and then then you practice implementing. That gives you some character and some strength, and that's the sort of thing that can help transform you into a leader. What you do is actually important, and what you leave undone as well. Both of those things. Like each individual is more significant and has more impact than they think, for better or for worse. I mean, you can think about it this way, in your lifetime, you're going to directly influence at least 1,000 people, and each of those 1,000 people will influence 1,000, and so that's 1,000,000 people, one person separated from you, and 1,000,000,000 people, two people separated from you. We live in a network, and we're really tightly associated with one another, and if you hold your head high and you confront the future courageously and you put your life together and you develop a integrated and valuable plan and you implement it and you're a trustworthy person, you have an unbelievably positive effect on everything around you. And so it actually matters that you do these things. And I don't believe that it really matters where in the formal power hierarchy you sit. Because you might think, well, I'm at the bottom of the power rungs, what influence do I have? And I think that's a bad way of thinking about it, because it doesn't take into account the networked issue. And so if you don't want things to be worse, which you wouldn't if you were a sensible person, then it would probably be better to work hard to make them better, and to also understand that you are playing a determining role in how reality unfolds when you're doing so. It's not a trivial thing. People are far more powerful forces for good and evil than they believe. So, and I think that's more true, and I haven't come to that realization lightly. So you want to be a leader in the best sense, and a leader in the best sense is someone who makes things better and not worse. And if we all made things better, then they would be a lot better, and that would be a good thing. That's what we should be striving for. To be precise in your speech does two things. It specifies your goal, and it reduces uncertainty. You see what you aim at. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I really don't, because you're a lot more blind than you think. There's a lot of the world that you don't see. You see most of what's in front of you in a very blurry way, like your peripheral vision is extremely low resolution. You see clearly a tiny focal area that's where you're pointing your eyes. And you point your eyes at what you want to pay attention to, And what you want to pay attention to is generally associated with what you want. So what that means is that the world reveals itself to you in relationship to what you want. And so that's really helpful because you want to see the world so you don't stumble blindly through it and fall into a pit. You want to get to where you're going. And so if you specify where you're going very clearly, then that enables you to see the pathway forward. Now, the upside to that is that you can probably get to where you want to go. The downside is you also make your conditions of failure very explicit. And that's hard on people in the short term. You know, it's easy to delude yourself and to leave everything vague because then you can't tell when you're failing. But that doesn't stop you from failing, it just stops you from seeing it while it's happening. Then the other advantage to being precise in your speech and your aims is that helps you tell the difference between what's important and what isn't important. And you want almost everything to be not important. You know, in times of crisis in your life, everything becomes important. So imagine that you have a new physical symptom that's distressing and you don't understand it. So then you're thinking, oh my God, what's happening? Am I collapsing physically? Have I got a serious illness? Is it a fatal illness? What's going to happen to my family? Is my whole life going to fall apart? Like, what happens when something that you can't specify occurs is that everything becomes relevant. And that's terrible. No one ever wants that. You want hardly anything to be relevant. And so if you specify your goal, then almost everything becomes irrelevant. And only those things that are important stand up in sharp relief. That's also a real boon to the people that you're communicating with because they know what you want then. And so even if you're a harsh person, let's say that you're pretty punitive and if people don't do a good job, you let them know. If you specify what you want, then they know how to avoid your harshness. And the more precise you are in your formulation of the problem and in your presentation of a solution and the role you might play in that solution, the more likely you are to advance on all fronts. As far as I can tell, there's nothing you can do that moves you and your agenda, your vision, let's say, forward faster than precision in speech. You have to know what it is that you're doing with your life, let's say, generally speaking, but more particularly in the next 3 to 5 years. What do you want? What do you want from your friends, your family, your intimate relationships, your employment, your education, your care of your mental and physical health, your response to temptations like drug and alcohol use? If you could have what you wanted, if you could lay your life out properly, how would you be functioning across those 7 dimensions? Why would that work for you? Why would it work for your family? And why would it work for the broader community? Then that gives you a reason. And if you have a reason that's well thought through, that you find compelling, so that's a compelling story, let's say, the kind of compelling story a leader might tell, then that will provide you with motivation to do the things that are difficult that you need to do. So that's positive emotion, that motivation. It's a neurochemical system that runs on the chemical dopamine. And it's the neurochemical system that underlies people's willingness to undertake something voluntarily. So we experience most positive emotion in relationship to a goal. And what that means is if you don't have a goal, then you don't have any motivation. And so what that means is you better have your goals well delineated, because that way you'll be maximally motivated. Now, the additional advantage to that is that if you have your goals delineated and they're compelling goals for you, it also makes you less anxious and uncertain and stressed, because your pathway forward into the future is mapped, and that makes it more certain, and uncertainty causes stress and physiological load. Okay, so you want to have your large-scale vision, you want to have it thought out on a 3 to 5 year basis, you want to have it cover those 7 or so dimensions that we already described. You want to see why it's relevant to you and your family and the broader community. You want to break that down into your monthly, weekly, and daily practices, and if they can be routinized, then so much the better. And then that becomes built into you.